What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the Cold War beta is now over, and therefore I wanted to wrap things up and share my final thoughts on the beta and whether or not I feel Cold War is going to be a good Call of Duty game. Now in this video, I'm going to be focusing more on the big picture stuff. I'm not really going to be getting into the little things. If you guys want to see my feedback on some of the little things that I feel could be improved with this game, I will leave a link to that down below. But today, I'm going to be mainly focusing on big picture stuff. And yes, a lot of the stuff I say in today's video, I've said before in either previous videos talking about the beta or throughout my live streams. So a lot of it will be repeating things I've already said before. But I just wanted to put it all together in this final sort of beta wrap-up video. And without further ado, let's just hop into it. Normally with these videos, I start off with the good and then I talk about the things I didn't like after that. Today, we're going to flip it around. It's going to make more sense once we get to the end of the video here. So let's start with the things that I didn't like or I feel like need some improvement or need some work. And the first thing here is the disbanding lobbies. This is actually one of my biggest complaints throughout the beta is the lobbies automatically disbanding. And I know it doesn't happen after every game, and I think in the second weekend, they made it less likely for lobbies to disband, but they were still very often disbanding on me. And I just feel like this takes a lot away from the online multiplayer experience. It doesn't really allow you to connect to other players. It doesn't allow you to learn how other players are playing and adapt to them over several games, because you're only going to see them for that one game. I also noticed it's really frustrating when you get into a game late if lobbies are just going to disband afterward, because even if you stick with that game that you joined late where you're most likely losing and possibly being completely dominated by the other team, even if you stick with that, you're not guaranteed to get a fresh lobby the next game. And whether this disbanding lobby thing has to do with skill-based matchmaking or quick play filters, I don't care. Whatever the reason for it is, I really strongly don't like the fact that lobbies are automatically disbanding on us. And going off of this is connections. I feel like disbanding lobbies can also make the connection issues more frustrating, because if you often struggle with connection related issues and you're often getting really bad lobbies where it's really laggy, it's so frustrating when you finally find a good connection lobby and everything feels really good and the gunfights feel fair and everything, and then you're thrown out of that lobby and you have no option to stay in that lobby if you wanted to because it just disbands on you. But expanding further into the connection issues, I do want to mention the first week of the beta. You guys may have seen my week 1 impressions video. I wasn't enjoying myself at all because the connections were just terrible for me. The game was almost unplayable. I had a horrible time. I wasn't enjoying myself at all. But then came the second week of the beta, and it immediately flipped around on me. It was literally a night and day difference from week 1 to week 2 when it comes to my connection experience, and suddenly the game was so much more enjoyable. The entire second week and weekend of the beta was generally very good connection-wise for me. Now, that's not to say that I didn't have some laggy lobbies, or some games where there was just that one enemy player where it seems like my bullets just didn't register on that particular player, but it did on all the other players just fine. I was running into that sometimes, but overall, in the second weekend, my connection experience was great. However, I also recognize there are a bunch of people that had the opposite experience, where the first beta weekend, connections were great for them, and then the second beta weekend, things fell apart and it felt horrible for them. So to me, this just signals that the connection issues really need to be continually worked on and monitored after the game launches, and I wouldn't anticipate a perfect connection experience even within like the first month of the game's life cycle. But hopefully that's something that they can continue to work on and get to a good place for as many people as possible as soon as possible. But moving on to the next thing on my dislike list, this is visibility. I did an entire video talking about visibility a couple days ago. So if you guys want to see all the details of that, and I actually show off several situations where players are practically invisible on my screen even though they are on my screen, I will leave that video linked in the description as well. But basically, this is an area where I really hope they work on the visibility issues, perhaps add a little bit of illumination on character models just to provide a bit more depth and contrast with the background, because there are several situations where things look really flat and the enemy character models just completely blend into the background, and I really don't feel that suits this style of gameplay that we have in Cold War. Next up on my list here is player movement, more so third-person player movement. When you're in first person, the movement feels pretty good, feels like a pre-Modern Warfare Call of Duty game, which I don't think is bad by any means. I do think it is a slight step back from Modern Warfare's movement, but I also don't think it's horrible. I think it feels just fine in first person. It's mainly that third-person perspective. If you're watching another character model, They do really weird things sometimes, especially with a really good player that knows how to utilize and take advantage of that movement in Cold War. There are many situations where it looks like enemy character models are on like skates, for instance, or they're kind of gliding around, and it just looks really unnatural. And it also leads to situations where it just feels literally impossible to track that target, especially with a controller. So I hope that's something they could clean up a little bit. Perhaps they even need to nerf the sliding a little bit more. I know they nerfed it from the first week to the second week of the beta, but it might need even less acceleration than it currently has, because it's an extremely powerful move to be using right now, because it's just so hard to track that character model. Now, going off of this leads me into the aiming issues, which again, I made a dedicated video talking all about the details of how the aiming felt really weird from a controller player's perspective. I don't know so much for mouse and keyboard, although I have heard some complaints in that area as well. But there were several things that just felt off with the aiming. It didn't feel like what we're used to in Call of Duty, and it's not just because I got used to Modern Warfare and we're taking more of a step back to previous Call of Duty games. Even when I compare it to Black Ops 4, it just feels off. And much of this is due to the fact that it seems like they've completely changed how they're handling aim assist in this game, and it's like it's way stronger, but that also means it fights against you in a lot of situations more than ever before. So it's like sometimes that aim assist basically locks you onto target to the point where it doesn't even feel good or satisfying to get the kill, but then there's other times where that aim assist is pushing you away from the target and you have to really fight hard to get onto the target, and it just completely screws you over, which is also really, really frustrating. So especially when it comes to aim assist here, I really hope what they do is scrap whatever they did to the aim assist for Cold War, and then basically just copy and paste whatever they had in Black Ops 4. I think the aim assist in that game was perfectly fine. I don't think anybody had any issues or complaints, although we didn't have crossplay at the same time. But still, I don't think the aim assist was a problem in Black Ops 4. It felt good, felt normal, felt natural. And that's what I would like to see in Cold War going forward. Moving on, score streaks. Again, something I've talked about in much greater detail that I'm not going to get into in today's video. But overall, I simply prefer the traditional score streak system over this new system they've introduced. Even though they've done a bunch of tweaking and changing the multipliers, and they have improved things a little bit, I feel, with all these tweaks. But in my opinion, no matter how much they make these adjustments to this score streak system, I don't think it will ever be as good as the traditional score streak system. I find the traditional score streak system to feel much more rewarding when you actually earn a streak, whereas with this streak system, it just feels like they're sort of power-ups that you earn as you play. Especially if you're a reasonably skilled player, you just kind of know that you're going to get your streaks every game, and it's just a matter of when or maybe how many times you're going to earn the streaks. Whereas with the traditional score streak system, there was never any sort of guarantee there. You had to actually put the work in, go on a streak, and I find it was just much more rewarding because the tension and adrenaline would build up as you go on that streak, and at any point that could be taken away from you, and I found that to be much more exciting. Plus, I found objective play to actually be rewarded more with the previous score streak system, because if you look at the amount of score you would get per objective point that you would play, or kills that you get while on the objective, the percentage of score that that would give you toward earning your score streak in the traditional streak system was significantly higher than it is with the current score streak system. The current score streak system, playing the objective is more like a slight boost to your streak, whereas with the older score streak system, it could very well be that thing that earns you the streak, especially if you grab a couple kills while you're on a B flag, for instance, in domination. That could immediately earn you some great rewards, as I feel it should, because you're making big plays. So yeah, the score streak system, I'm not a fan of it. However, I don't anticipate any large-scale changes because this is part of their marketing for this game, is this new score streak system they've developed. So it's something I can live with. It's not a deal breaker for me. I just think it's kind of unfortunate that we don't have the traditional score streaks. As for the next thing on my list, this is a big one that I'm sure a lot of you guys have been waiting for, skill-based matchmaking. Now, if you've been around my channel for a while, you guys know I hate strict skill-based matchmaking in an unranked environment. I don't think it makes any sense, especially for a more casual-oriented first-person shooter like Call of Duty. And while I'm not going to get into all the details of that because I've done dedicated videos on that many times in the past, and this isn't a skill-based matchmaking video, just know that I am against it being very strict in an unranked environment. As for my thoughts on the skill-based matchmaking in the second weekend of the beta particularly, like I said, the first weekend of the beta was kind of a write-off for me because the connections were so bad. But in the second weekend, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't feel like the skill-based matchmaking was too strict or too punishing. Was it there? Yeah, I could definitely feel that on average, the people I were playing against had a tendency to be a bit on the better side overall. It's not that there weren't any bad players in my lobbies or anything, but basically it felt like I got a pretty good mix of experiences while playing throughout the beta. Sometimes I had super sweaty games. It felt like I was on the main stage competing in a tournament, and it was extremely difficult because the enemies were just so good. But then many other games, it felt very mixed, or even some games it felt easy and I was just stomping on people. And that felt a lot like a pre-Modern Warfare Call of Duty game to me, at least. And I know there's probably already a lot of people thinking that I'm being some kind of a shill here by saying this and trying to downplay the issue, but I streamed literally every single game that I played in the second weekend of the beta, so if you want to go to my Twitch channel, you can check out the VODs there and see literally every game I played in the second weekend. And if you go and watch those, you'll see pretty clearly that I got a very good mix of lobbies. Sometimes I was able to go pistol only and do great. Other times I was using the best setups out there and barely going even. There was a good variety there, and I didn't see any super strict trends. Now, this was just my experience, and maybe this is affected by the region I play in or some other factor. So if you did feel really strict skill-based matchmaking, I'm not saying that you didn't experience it. I'm just sharing my experience, and to me, it just didn't feel very strict. So to be clear, I am on your side. I don't like strict skill-based matchmaking in regular public matches, and I will be doing a full-on study of skill-based matchmaking once the full game launches, so we'll see where it's at once it launches. But my experience in the second weekend of the beta was actually pretty good in this area. It felt like I got a nice mix of experiences. But finally, there's one last thing I wanted to cover in the bad section, and this one is more of a minor thing, even though I said I'm going to focus mainly on big picture. But I don't even know if I've mentioned it in any of my previous feedback videos, so I just want to make sure it's included here. This is, I don't like the fact that you can have the same operator on both teams. I think most people agree with that. That's just really odd and jarring. It's so weird to see situations where you have like a teammate who's using the Woods character model. That seemed to be the most common one that people were using. And you'd see him over in an area, but then you're busy dealing with something else. And then when you look back over to that area, you see a Woods character model again. And obviously your immediate thought would be like, oh yeah, that's that same teammate I just saw there because it looks exactly like him. Turns out that's an enemy and you're now dead. It just doesn't make any sense. I really hope this is just a beta thing. Maybe they didn't want to show off too many operators for the beta, or maybe they weren't complete or something for the beta. And I'm really hoping in the full build of the game, they will be separating character models into two different factions. But with that, that actually wraps it up for the more big picture things that I didn't really like about the beta. And this is where I want to move into the good thing about this game. And the reason I decided to postpone the good stuff until the end of the video is I wanted to mention the good thing about this game, in my opinion, is it's got a very solid gameplay foundation. Most of the things I've mentioned on the bad side of things, that's not foundational level issues. Those are issues that can be worked on and tweaked and improved over time, and I anticipate they will be. At the end of the day, what's important to me is the core gameplay experience, and in the second weekend of the beta, once my connection was better, I actually had a great time playing the beta, and it felt much more like a return to what Call of Duty is, or at least what I like about Call of Duty, compared to Modern Warfare. Now, I understand many of you here love Modern Warfare's multiplayer, and that's fine. That's a preference-based thing. I don't like Modern Warfare's multiplayer, and I never have, even from the pre-release events. I never enjoyed myself with Modern Warfare's 6v6 experience. Whereas with Cold War, I'm sure a lot of people that love Modern Warfare, you're just not going to like Cold War's gameplay, and that's totally fine. But for me and for my preferences, I really enjoy the foundation of the gameplay in Cold War. And what I mean by the foundation, it's a combination of a ton of factors. So like the time to kill and the fact that we have no flinch, for instance, I really like how that feels. I think that's a really good foundational aspect. There are actual gunfights that tend to last a little bit of time, requires a little bit more sustained accuracy, and it rewards headshots because there's no flinch, so you can actually aim directly at the head. And I feel like that improves the whole gunfight experience. Also, footstep audio. This might seem like a minor thing, but this is a major reason for why I really didn't like Modern Warfare's multiplayer gameplay, is there was no permanent dead silence perk, and your standard footstep audio was so freaking loud that you could actually rely on hearing enemy footstep sounds and feel completely safe that almost nobody would get within a radius of you without you being able to pinpoint their exact location by just using your ears. I don't like that part of Modern Warfare. I love that part about Cold War. Somebody could be using Ninja, and therefore you have to have much better minimap awareness, much better awareness of the gaps that your team is leaving that enemies could be flanking through, much better awareness of the spawns. I find the gameplay in Cold War rewards much more of that big picture play because you can't rely on your ears to let you know anytime an enemy comes near you. And I also feel like this is one of the biggest reasons that people were actually actively moving all over the place in the Cold War beta. It was fairly rare that I was running into really hardcore campers that were just locking down one really small area of the map. For the most part, it seemed like people felt really comfortable moving around the map and actually sprinting around places. And I think a huge reason for this is because they weren't constantly being sound-whored and you weren't really heavily punished for running around. Going off of that, something I briefly mentioned there, spawns. I find the spawns in Cold War, for the most part, are just intuitive. On most maps, in most game modes, with a few exceptions in the beta, they work how you'd expect them to work. Again, contrasting that with Modern Warfare, where it seems like the developers were trying to do everything in their power to eliminate any sort of map control. And I feel like that's a big part of the Call of Duty experience from the past, is that sort of push and pull with map control. And I'm not talking about spawn trapping here, I'm talking about general map control. You fight really hard to gain that map control over the other team and push them back a little bit. And when you have map control, you have the advantage because you're limiting the other team's options by pushing them back into a smaller area of the map. Then they have the opportunity to push back and try and regain that map control over you, and if they do, they gain the advantage. I love that push-pull style of gameplay that Call of Duty normally has that in a lot of ways seem to disappear with Modern Warfare. And a huge part of that is the spawn design. Part of it is also map design, but spawns I think are the more important part. So those are the main points when it comes to that foundational gameplay that I'm talking about. I think Cold War has a much better foundation than Modern Warfare has ever had. Again, a lot of that is preference-based. Some people will disagree, and that's totally fine. But for me and my preferences and what I like about Call of Duty, I think the foundation is far superior in Cold War, even though the game isn't nearly as polished as Modern Warfare. I totally agree, Modern Warfare looks better, Modern Warfare's character movement feels better, Modern Warfare's aiming feels better, also the attention to detail is better. A lot of what Modern Warfare did is better, but I don't think it has a good gameplay foundation to it, and therefore I don't enjoy playing it. Whereas with Cold War, it needs a lot of polish, it needs a lot of work. There's a lot of things that I feel need to be either fixed or tweaked in some way. But on the positive side, for me, the foundation is solid, and therefore I think this is going to be a great year of Call of Duty for me. Now, some of my concerns going into launch, though, I think the biggest concern I have is content, the amount of content we get at launch. So how many guns, how many maps, what sort of quality of maps are we going to be seeing at launch? That is concerning me a little bit. And also, simply the amount of time they have between now and launch, it's not that much time. So while I feel like they'll clean up some of the issues that I've mentioned in today's video between now and launch, I don't think they'll get to all of them, and I kind of feel like this is going to be one of the situations where the game might not launch in an amazing state, but give it a month or two and a few title updates, and perhaps at that point, we would have a very, very solid Call of Duty game that a lot of people are going to love. Do I think it'll turn out to be my favorite Call of Duty of all time? No. Quite simply, I don't think it's going to reach that point, but I do think it's going to be a very enjoyable Call of Duty, for me at least. So at this point, I guess it's just one of those wait-and-see situations. I'm really hoping we see some improvements for launch, and overall, I'm quite excited to be back and actually grinding a Call of Duty multiplayer game hard. Of course, these are all just my opinions though, and I would like to know in the comments section below, what do you think about Black Ops Cold War now that we've had an alpha as well as 2 beta weeks? What are your overall thoughts on this? Do you think it's going to shape up to be a really good Call of Duty game, maybe after a few patches? Or do you think the whole game is chalked and it's got no hope and it's just going to fail? Just let me know all of those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.